Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya yato anvayaditaratascha artheshu abhigyaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Varimridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Swena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. So we now enter the 13th chapter of the 8th Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we saw the conclusion of the whole story of the churning of the ocean of milk. Now Shuka Brahmarshi continues with the remaining Manvantaras. So as we can remember, the Skandha, the entire 8th Skandha is about the Manvantaras. Parikshit asked about the various Manvantaras, and that's how Shuka Brahmarshi gave a description of the various Manvantaras and the specific glorious activities of Bhagavan, such as Gajendra Moksham in the Tamasa Manvantara and the Samudra Manthan in the Chakshusha Manvantara. So just to recap, the whole division of time is very important and beautifully given by Bhagavatam. So there is 4 yugas that are the basic foundation. They are starting with Krita Yuga or Satya Yuga, then Treta Yuga, then Dwapara Yuga, then Kali Yuga. And these 4 yugas form one cycle. And it is said that 71 such cycles is called as one Manvantara. So the 4 yugas are also called Chatur Yuga. And the cycle of 4 yugas goes on in a descending order, that is, Satya Yuga lasts 4 times, and Treta Yuga 3 times, Dwapara Yuga 2 times, and Kali Yuga 1 time. So the duration of Kali Yuga is only 1/10 of the total, and so on. 2/10 for Dwapara, 3/10 for Treta, and 4/10 for Satya Yuga or Krita Yuga. So that completes the one cycle of 4 yugas. And 71 such Chatur Yugas, that is 71 by 4, that cycle completes one Manvantara. Manvantara means the Manu changes, and that's why it's called Manvantara. Manu plus Antara becomes Manvantara. So the Antar of Manu, that is the change of Manu, happens after 71 cycles. And 14 such Manvantaras form one Kalpa. Kalpa is the total cycle of 1000 yuga, Chatur Yugas, therefore. So 71 cycles of Chatur Yugas form one Manvantara. 14 such Manvantaras form one Kalpa. Therefore 71 into 14 is 1000 nearly. And 1000 Chatur Yugas, 1000 cycles of 4 yugas forms one Kalpa. And it is said that 100 such Kalpas forms the life of Brahma. So this is the grand scheme of time that's given, and this was already described by Shuka Brahmarshi to Parikshit. So with this clear, Parikshit asked about the various Manvantaras now. So as we see, there are 14 Manvantaras. So the first Manvantara was Swayambhuva Manu, we saw that. Then Parikshit asked about the subsequent Manvantaras. So there Shuka Brahmarshi gave the subsequent Manvantaras as Swarochisha, next Manu, then Uttama, the third Manu, fourth Manu was Tamasa, where Gajendra Moksham took place, fifth Manu was Raivata, and sixth Manu was Chakshusha, where the whole Samudra Manthan episode took place. Now Shuka Brahmarshi goes to the seventh Manu, which is the present Manu. So we are now in the 7th Manvantara, it is said, which is called Vaivaswata Manvantra, because the present Manu is called the son of Vaivaswan. Vaivaswan is another name for sun, and this, that is the sun, which is the Aditya, Surya, and his son is Vaivaswata, and that is the Manu for the present age. So that is why for those who do Sankalpa, they say Vaivaswata Manvantare for this particular period. So Vaivaswan has one son called Shraddha. He is the one who is also called as Vaivaswata, who is the present Manu. And the Shraddha had many sons beginning with Ikshwaku. So Ikshwaku is a very famous name. Many know because Ikshwaku is the dynasty in which Ram appears. In Valmiki Ramayana, it is said Ikshwaku Vamsha Prabhavo Ramo Nama Janaishrutaha. So in the Vamsha, in the lineage of Ikshwaku came the great Ram. So Ikshwaku is considered the first king, and he was the son of Vaivaswata Manu, who is Shraddha. So in every Manvantara, as we saw already, there is the Manu, his sons, the Devatas, the Indra, and the also the manifestation of the Supreme Being. So the Manu, as we saw, is Vaivasvata, which is Shraddha. His sons are Ikshwaku and others such as Nabhaga, Drishta, and many more. And the Devatas are listed as the 12 Adityas, the 11 Rudras, the 8 Vasus, the 49 Maruts, the 2 Ashwins, and so on. So the 12 Adityas are the sons of Aditi. We saw them already. Vivaswan himself is an Aditya, the first Aditya, then Aryama and Pusha and so on. And the 12th Aditya, in fact, is the appearance of the Supreme Being as Vamana. So we saw this briefly mentioned before. Now it will be explained more. So the 12 Adityas, the 12th being the Supreme Being himself, the 8 Vasus, the 11 Rudras, they all form the various demigods, but the 12th alone is special in this particular Manvantara because as the 12th Aditya came forth the Supreme Being. The 7 Rshis are always there in every Manvantara. In this Manvantara, they are very famous Rshis because they are the present Manvantara. Everybody has heard of them. They are Kashyapa, Atri, Vasishtha, Vishwamitra, Gautama, Jamadagni, Bharadwaja. These are the 7 Rshis, Sapta Rshis, and the manifestation of the Supreme Lord, as we already said, is as the 12th Aditya, the last son of Aditi, who is called as Vamana. So it is said, Atrapi Bhagavat Janma Kashyapa Aditer Abhut Aditya Nama Varajo Vishnur Vamana Rupadrak. So he came as Vamana. Vamana means dwarf. So one who came in the form of a dwarf Brahman, that is, who was very short. And we will see the beautiful pastime of Vamana little later in this Skandha. Here it's mentioned that Vamana is the form of the Supreme Lord in this particular Manvantara. Of course, there are special manifestations of Ram and Krishna which comes later, which are also part of this Manvantara, but the specific assigned manifestation of the Supreme Lord is Vamana, and that's what is mentioned here by Shuka Brahmarshi. So thus the 7th Manvantara, which is the present Manvantara, is described. And here Shuka Brahmarshi says, going forward, that Vivaswan, who is the father of the Manu, present Manu, he had 2 wives, Sanya and Chaya, and with his first wife he had this Shraddha, who is the present Manu, Vaivaswata Manu. He also had another son and daughter who are Yama and Yami. Yama, as we know, is the demigod of death, who is the very son of Vivaswan, and the daughter Yami is the presiding deity of the river Yamuna. So, and then Vivaswan had another wife, it is said, called Chaya. Through her he had a son called Savarni, and he happens to be the next Manu. So Parikshit also wanted to know the future Manus and what are the various descents of the Lord in them. So we saw the first 6 in the previous chapters. Now Shuka Brahmarshi described the present Manu, who is Vaivasvata, and the appearance of the Lord as Vamana, and the 7 Rshis, the Sapta Rshis, and the various Devatas, who are the Adityas, Rudras, Vasus, and so on. And then going forward, he also gives an overview of the upcoming 7 more Manvantaras, because there are totally 14 Manvantaras, as we said. 6 are over, we are in the 7th, and there is 7 more, it is said. So the next Manvantara, 8th Manvantara, is going to have Savarni as the Manu. Savarni is the son of Vivaswantu, the other through the other wife, And so Savarni is the Manu, and it is said that in this Manvantara, the next Manvantara, Bali will be Indra. So this is again something very important to note. In the present Manvantara, for instance, the name of Indra is Purandara, but in the next Manvantara it is Bali. So this is why it is said that all these so-called demigods, including Indra himself, and then all the way up to Brahma, because Brahma also, as we said, according to this cosmology of time, after 100 cycles of 1000 yugas, Brahma is also changed. So it is a way of saying that no entity, however great they are, is eternal except the one supreme being. So Indra, who is the so-called ruler of heaven, is simply a title, and it's just a title that lasts for a very long time. Brahma, who is the creator, is also only a title ultimately, even though it lasts a really long time. And so here it is said that in the next Manvantara, it will be a different Indra, because Bali, who is actually the head of the demons in the present Manvantara, and we'll see the story of Bali with Vamana later in the Skandha, and how Bali offers himself completely to the Lord, even though he is a demon chief. We already saw the equanimity of Bali in the defeat at the hands of Indra, and how he was revived by Shukracharya. So Bali, being the grandson of Prahalada, is a very enlightened, though demon-bodied being. And therefore, when he is revived, he will go on to rule, and he will in fact do a complete surrender, which we will see in the most beautiful pastime of Vamana, which is described later. But because of that, he is assigned to a very opulent place called Sutala, and he is remaining there, it is said, for the rest of the Manvantara. And in the next Manvantara, Bali is made into the Indra, and after that he attains the supreme realization and attains the eternal abode of the Lord. So this is also a way of pointing out that all these titles, all these various deities that people worship, everything is finally just temporary. So if one recognizes this clearly, then one will not worship all these multitudes of various forces, various spirits, various belief systems coming forth, but recognize that there is only one underlying truth which is alone eternal, and he alone ought to be our object of surrender, nothing else. Therefore, Shuka Brahmarshi thus describes the next Manvantara with Bali as Indra, and then he also lists the 7 Rshis, such as Galava, Ashwathama, Rishyashringa, and so on. And in this particular Manvantara, it is said that the Supreme Lord will appear as Sarva Bhauma. That's the name of the Supreme Being in the next Manvantara, in the 8th Manvantara. And then after that, the next remaining Manvantaras are also briefly described. The 9th Manvantara is having a Manu called Daksha Savarni, and his sons are listed. There Indra is called Adbhuta, the Rshis are listed, and the Lord appears as Rishabha. Then the 10th Manvantara is called Brahma Savarni, and there again the Rshis are Havisman, Jaya, and so on. The Indra is Shambhu, and the Lord appears as Vishwaksena. And then the 11th Manvantara, the Manu is called as Dharma Savarni, and there again the Rishis' names are listed, and the Indra's name is also listed as Vaidhrita, and the Lord appears as Dharma Setu. Then the 12th Manu, 12th Manvantara, 12th Manu is Rudra Savarni. There again the Rishis are all listed. The Manu is called as Ritadhama, and the Lord appears as Swadhama. Then the 13th Manvantara, the Manu is called Deva Savarni. There again the Rishis, Devas are all listed. The Manu is called as Divaspati, and the Lord appears as Yogeshwara. And finally, the 14th Manvantara, the Manu is called Indra Savarni, and the Indra is called as Shuchi, and the Lord appears as Brihad Bhanu. So these are all just names mentioned, and because these Manvantaras are yet to happen, none of the pastimes are mentioned. So just for the sake of completion, Shuka Brahmarshi describes the remaining 7 Manvantaras with the names of the Manu, the names of Indra, and also the specific avatar the Supreme Being will take in each of these Manvantaras. Thus, Shuka Brahmarshi says, I have covered all the 14 Manvantaras, the past, that is the past 6 Manvantaras, the present, which is the current 7th Manvantara in detail, and the future, which is the remaining 7 Manvantaras. And therefore, Shuka Brahmarshi concludes this chapter while also giving a detailed overview of the present Manvantara. But of course, the present Manvantara will be described in great detail, expanding upon first the Vamana avatar, which was alluded to, and also the various yugas in this Manvantara where Sri Ram appeared. So it was mentioned briefly that Ikshvaku is the king, the first king. So his lineage, and how in his lineage, which is called as the solar dynasty, how Sri Ram appears as the avatar of the Lord. And then in the lunar dynasty, which is called Chandra Vamsha, how the Supreme Being Krishna, who is Swayam Narayana, appears in Dwapara Yuga. Those will be described in great detail in 9th and 10th Skandha and onward. But for the sake of completion, he just mentions the essential characteristics of the 7th Manvantara, which is the Manu, Vaivaswata or Shraddha Deva, the 7 Rshis, who are the famous Rshis after whom all the Gotras are all even kept till today. The form of the Lord as Vamana and Indra as Purandara, and then the remaining upcoming 7 Manvantaras briefly. And then we move to the 14th chapter where Parikshit asks, please tell me how the Manus and the Rshis and all the various beings work in each Manvantara, to which Shuka Brahmarshi replies, and he says, all the Manus, all the sons of the Manus who are the kings, the sages, the Indras, the various Devatas, they are all working under the direct command of the Supreme Being. So it is finally important to notice that the whole essence of all this is to point out that even in our own little way in which we perceive this world, there is different people in command at different levels, at the district level, state level, national level, international level, but all of them are only having a specific title for a specific time period, and that is only the case with these so-called Manus and Indras and Devatas. Their time period is much longer, their power is much greater, yet it is all limited, and it is the Supreme Being who is the only eternal support for all of these various titles and various power centers, it is said. And Shuka Brahmarshi also says at the end of each cycle of 4 yugas, a new set of rishis come forth to bring out the teachings, that is, to the Vedas, which are always eternal, and yet somehow they are lost in time, and after some time they are recovered, and this cycle goes on. So he says, Chaturyugante kalena grasta shruti ganan yatha tapasa rishayo apashyan yato dharma sanatanah. So the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal way of living, which is coming forth from the Shruti, from the Vedas, from all the teachings, is revealed. That's why it is not authored by anyone, it is revealed. And Shuka Brahmarshi says that at the end of every Chatur Yuga, that is the cycle of 4 yugas, it is seemingly lost, and then there is a new set of rishis who recover it through their own meditation and their asceticism and their vision, and they discover it and they demonstrate it. So in fact, this is what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita too. In fact, when he advises Arjuna in the 4th chapter, he says, this teaching I am giving you is been there eternally, but it was lost and I am giving you again. He says, Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivaswan Manave Praha Muni Rikshwakave Abravit. So here we see also the names which we just heard. Krishna says there, I gave this very same teaching I am giving you, Arjuna, the same teaching I gave to Vivaswan. And Vaivaswan in turn gave it to his son, who is the Manu, Vaivaswata Manu. And the Vaivaswata Manu gave it to his son Ikshwaku, and that's how it came through a lineage. But then Krishna says, Sa kalena iha mahata yogo nashtaf parantapa. But then over time it got lost, and therefore I am giving it to you again because you are my dear devotee. Bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam hetaduttamam. Therefore, because you are my dear devotee, I am again revealing this truth to you. So, this is exactly what is mentioned here by Shuka Brahmarshi as well. And so, when the teachings are seemingly lost, the Rshis, they discover it by their own asceticism, or sometimes, as we see in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan himself descends and reveals the teaching again as he did to Arjuna. And the Supreme Being also directs all the various entities, as it is said, the Manu and all the others, whoever is discharging administration, they are all directed by the one power who is the Supreme Being. And being directed by the Supreme Being, the true kings, who are the Manus, they are always having the Lord in their heart and fully alert in their mind, and thereby they maintain the fourfold qualities of Dharma. It is said they are Tapa, Shaucha, Daya, Satyam. That is, Tapa means austerity or asceticism. Shaucha means purity of both mind and body. Daya means compassion, and Satya means truth. So, this is essentially what is described as the true quality of a king. So, the teaching here is the Manus are the kings, and they are meant to have the Lord in their heart, alert in their mind, and propagate these four aspects in their rulership. So, in other words, this is the sign of a good king, one who has the Lord in his heart, whose mind is always alert, and who ensures that these fourfold dharma of austerity, purity, compassion, and truth are supported by the government and by the people. And that is, when that is missing, there is adharma. And whenever there is adharma, as Krishna says in the Gita, it leads to destruction, and then he comes forth, descends in a certain form, paritranaya sadhunam, vinashaya cha dushkritam, dharma sansthapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So he says, I descend whenever there is this fourfold dharma is lost and there is a lot of adharma or unrighteousness rising, then I descend to correct things, as it were. So here Shuka Brahmarshi continues and says, therefore the Manus and his sons, they rule until the end of each Manvantara, generation by generation, and along with all the Rshis, the other humans and other living entities, they engage in the right sacrifices, which is the way to live in harmony. So the way to live in harmony is to make everything sacred, which is to sacrifice, which is to say that one has to honor one's forefathers, one's teachers, and the great sages, and also all of nature, and live in harmony with all of this. This is the way of living. And when that harmony is missing again because of lack of dharma, then of course things are not in balance, and it leads to the cycle of destruction followed by regeneration and so on. And so the Lord comes forth every time this happens. So here again, Shuka Brahmarshi says this is the way the cycle goes from Manu to Manu, and even within each Manvantara, from generation to generation, this goes on. And the Lord appears also in each yuga in various forms. He says he comes like the perfect being, Siddhas. He comes as yogis. He comes as Rshis. He comes as great teachers. He comes as great devotees. He comes as great kings. So, finally Shuka Brahmarshi says he comes in the form of time as well. So the way to look at all of this is essentially it is all Bhagavan coming forth in various forms. So he comes in all these various forms. In fact, in the Gita again, in the 10th chapter, when Krishna talks about Vibhuti, the glory, he speaks about how he is all the various manifestations are essentially him appearing in those ways, such as Kapila among the great munis and Himalaya among the mountains, Banyan among trees, Arjuna among Pandavas, and on and on. It is to give an indication that anything that seems glorious, wonderful, powerful, radiant is all coming forth only from the Supreme Being. And therefore, here also Shuka Brahmarshi says, it is the Lord who comes forth as all of this, as the great Rshis, the great yogis, the great sages, the great seers, the great devotees, and time itself that eventually makes everybody disappear as well. So, while there is great diversity, and therefore one who is caught in Maya can get deluded because of all the various names and forms and all the various systems of philosophy. If one is clear, then one can see that it is the Lord who appears in all these names and forms, and thereby making sure that the cycle of creation goes on as per his divine will. So, this way, Shuka Brahmarshi concludes the narration of the 14 Manvantaras, and he says this is the cycle which results in what's called as Kalpa, and Mahakalpa is 100 Kalpas, which is the life cycle of Brahma, and this is the whole essence of time and all the Manvantaras. With this, this chapter concludes, and the narration of the 14 Manvantaras also concludes. Now, Shuka Brahmarshi will move on to this particular Manvantara, Vaivaswata Manvantara, and the various happenings in this, starting with the whole pastime of Bali and how that brought forth Vamana avatar and the whole beautiful pastime of Vamana becoming Trivikrama. That will continue with the next chapter. And thus we end this chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.